Good morning, evening or afternoon, depending on when you are tuning into this, which is the latest episode in our Susty Talk video series. Originally launched at the start of lockdown here in the UK, Susty Talk is designed to help you guys keep connected to sustainability leaders across the world, something we hope will still be useful as lockdown eases, given that a lot of us are still on furlough or working remotely. I'm delighted that joining us today for this episode of the talk from Switzerland, we have PMI's Chief Sustainability Officer. How are you doing today, Huub? I'm
doing very well. It's okay.
Good, and it's great to have you on. I know we managed to catch up with Laurence and a couple of your team. I can't even remember if it was earlier this year or late last year. Everything seems to be blurring into one.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to hear about how you and the rest of your team have been working during lockdown, what lockdown's been like in Switzerland, and how you've been finding that.
Of course, it was a big shock and something you could never expect would happen in real life. And I remember even the week before we started working from home, we were all, not even thinking this could be serious, it could happen. And then the week after, early March, we got a message within the company, everybody starts working from home as of now. And that was, I think, the second week of March. So we are 5 months later and I'm still working from home. And the same is true for my whole team. We have an office in Lausanne with approximately 1,800 people normally speaking. And now there's maybe 300-400 in the office maximum. All the rest is working from home. To my surprise, actually, at least for me, it works very well. And what was a positive surprise is we were just in the finishing phase of our integrated report. And as you can imagine, it's quite a complex task to do. We had, over 100 SMEs contributing to the report. We had a review with our senior management. We had a review with the board of directors. All of that done via Teams or Zoom, and it worked very smoothly. So I think in some cases, I think it works easily. But of course, if you're working in a factory or in a different kind of role, I mean, it's a very difficult situation. So right. Yeah, I think we are in a lucky position that it is easy to work from home.
Mm-hmm. No, we're hearing this from a lot of sustainability teams that they're really good at using digital tech to keep connected and complete tasks. And the integrated report that you spoke about was published a few days ago.
End of June, yeah.
Mm-hmm, great. And so it's something that we've been seeing a lot of is integrated reporting. Back when I first joined edie around 2 years ago, there was talks of the shift to integrated reporting sort of as a theory or as something that would be coming on the horizon, sort of a future trend that now seems to be materializing. So it'd be good to hear about why you guys opted for an integrated report. And something else that I found interesting about the report is that it's framed as E, S and G rather than C, S and R.
Yeah, I think the short answer to your question is that for us, corporate strategy and sustainability strategy are actually one and the same thing. So, I think when you publish a sustainability report, you suggest something artificial, i.e. there is a difference between this and the business strategy. And I think it's also because very often when people talk about sustainability, they think primarily about environment. And of course, in our case as a tobacco company, the most material topic, an issue that we face is the product that we sell and the impact to the consumer. Mm. And so, we could be the best in class when it comes to the environment. As long as, you sell a product that is so harmful to the consumer, you can never be really a sustainable company. And therefore, we have put the product at the core of our ESG strategy, so to speak. And you can also say what I always find missing in ESG is the P. There's no P of product in ESG to some extent. And so that's why we have an integrated report, which is very comprehensive and explains, I would say, things from A to Z. Because the other thing that we face is that, what we are doing about the product is replacing cigarettes completely with better alternatives. And we think actually we can, within 10 to 15 years, in many countries, cigarettes can disappear because you have better alternative, such as a heated tobacco product. And in order to explain that to stakeholders and get their buy-in, many people don't trust what we do. Many people don't know our company. So you need quite a comprehensive report. And that's what we have done to explain to stakeholders what we do and also to be transparent in terms of KPIs and so forth. So the report basically has, first of all, a statement of purpose, where the board has signed and developed this purpose statement, which says, what is our company about? What are we trying to achieve? and what are the key stakeholders that play a role to go towards a smoke-free future. Then we have, of course, a lot of explanation of how we are trying to replace cigarettes with better alternatives. What are we doing in the traditional E, S, and G areas? And I think what's quite important as well is we have a set of what we call business transformation metrics, which make people understand how are we reallocating resources within the company to completely transform our company away from cigarettes towards these new products. So that made the report a bit long, but I think it's important for people to understand this is not just about sustainability, this is how we run our business, and it makes business sense to do this transformation.
Mm-hmm. No, and we covered a lot on the smoke-free future when I did get to go and meet Laurence earlier this year. So if anyone listening wants to search up that interview, you can just type PMI into our search bar and find out more about that initiative. But something that we did cover a lot was about the net zero carbon neutrality goal for factories. And this is the first report from PMI since I think that was announced. The report reveals that PMI's absolute emissions were down 42% since 2010. We're going to have a lot of people listening that do have a business that manufactures consumer products. So it'd be good to get some insight as to how that progress was delivered and what your plans are for future reduction too.
Yeah, I mean, the 42% is a absolute reduction for scope 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. And I think like many other companies, the majority of our emissions are in the supply chain. It's about 84% are in the upstream supply chain.
Right.
But maybe start first with scope 1 and 2. So scope 1 and 2 is mainly our factories, offices, and transportation. And Laurence probably already spoke about the factories. So we want to have all our factories carbon neutral by 2025. In fact, we have gone a step further since then. We have announced to be carbon neutral scope 1 and 2 by 2030 and carbon neutral by 2050 for scope 1 and 3, 2 and 3 combined. If you look at factories, it's mainly about reducing energy use. That's a big part of it. So more energy efficiency. Then looking at what kind of energy do you buy. So go for green electricity, other renewables. And our objective is that by 2025, we only buy green electricity. Then you have always a remaining part, and in our first carbon neutral factory in Lithuania, there was 1% remaining that we couldn't, let's say, reduce ourselves. And there we bought offsets. But that's really for us a sort of a last resort effort. If you think about factories all over the world, we have about 38 factories globally. So there it's, the usual things, energy reduction, more renewable fuels. For example, we had our last coal-fired boiler retired last year in South Africa, so no more use of coal there. And using green electricity, I think, is the key thing. And going forward, what is important for companies, I think, is to internalize the carbon price in the decision-making process. So when you do an investment in equipment, for example, you have options between different machinery or different boilers, which have maybe a different price tag, but also different energy efficiency or CO2 emissions. We will include sort of a shadow price in making the decision there. So a shadow price of $65 per ton in order to take into account the longer term perspective. But the biggest part of the reductions were really achieved in the supply chain. And what is quite unique in our case, I don't know how it is with other industries, but it's mainly in the curing of tobacco that you have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So Virginia tobacco is cured in curing barns. We buy tobacco from 335,000 farmers, many of them growing Virginia tobacco. And the focus of our effort has been, we have direct contracts with the farmers, but we don't own the barns ourselves. But basically to encourage farmers to improve the barn efficiency, to use better fuels, and basically improve the barns themselves. And so over the last 6 years, it's pretty amazing. I mean, Laurence and her team have improved 80,000 barns all over the world. And that's one big initiative in and of itself. And related to that, it's also how can we, instead of every farmer having their own barn, curing barn, can we do cooperative barns, larger barns, which are more efficient. And they're not only good for the environment, they also are better for the income of the farmer, which is also a very important aspect. Mm-hmm. So this is what we have been trying to do. And like I said, in our report, we went one step further in our targets. We want to be carbon neutral by 2030 for scope 1 and 2 and 2050 scope 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm. What I found interesting about the report as well is a lot of reports report on mitigation. So how far have emissions reduced? How far are you aiming to reduce them? But a bit less on adaptation. But
Yeah.
this report has significant space dedicated to these are the likely impacts of climate change on our supply chain. This is where we need to adapt. This is the national climate legislation that's going to affect our supply chain and operations in the current years, and it's something that we're seeing a bit more of as a result of COVID-19, I think, and in the run up to COP26. But I don't know if it's your feeling too that this is the direction of travel for reporting.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think rightly so. I think investors and regulators do not only want to see companies reducing emissions, they want to know what is the impact on your business of climate change. And so if you look at TCFD, for example, that's one of the major requirements there. And so we have done an analysis of that. The impacts on us are not that significant, but I think where the major impact will come, and I think it's in terms of regulation and taxation, because I think ultimately, the climate crisis is one of the biggest challenges for mankind at this moment and in the years to come. And not enough action is taken. And I think, as an economist, I think there's only one way to do it well: introduce a carbon tax. And we need, I think, a decent, large carbon tax introduced globally, and we would be supportive of that. Because only by internalizing external cost will you adjust practices of business, and people will need to rethink supply chains and transportation ways as a result. But I think carbon taxes are really essential, and they will come, and this will be one of the impacts, I would say, on businesses globally.
Mm-hmm. No, it's definitely something we're following. So here in the UK, there'll need to be new carbon taxing regulations as a result of Brexit, seeing as we're no longer going to be in the EU ETS. That's then going to push the ETS itself to potentially change as well. And TCFD reporting is going to be mandated in the coming years as well, which is something I know that a lot of governments are looking at too.
Yeah, and investors are also asking for it. I think, of course, most of the investors we speak to talk about our most material topics. Child labor and tobacco growing is one of them. I would say marketing and sales to underage, to our marketing and sales practices is another topic. But climate change for sure is a topic a lot of investors ask about, and rightly so, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned that obviously the most material impact for the business will always be the products, will always just be the fact that it is a tobacco company and some of the considerations that you just mentioned that go with it. But the report does highlight how waste management and resource management is becoming of more concern to consumers and to investors. And as such, it has a new target to halve plastic litter from products by 2025. I really like the name of the campaign. It's called "The World Is Not an Ashtray." It'd be great to hear why you think that this is sort of moving up the materiality spectrum and how you're hoping to meet that target.
Yeah, we did a formal materiality analysis at the end of 2019, because I think one of the challenges in sustainability is always to know where do we put our resources, what are the priorities. And we started with a long list of 26 topics, and then based on impact analysis and based on stakeholder feedback, we made a short list, and it was 10 topics remained. The product, as you mentioned, but within the environment area, the 3 topics were climate, cigarette butt littering, and eco-design of our electronic devices. And when you look at cigarette butt littering, the major reason for that is that cigarette filters are made of cellulose acetate, which is a bioplastic. Mm-hmm. And many people unfortunately throw away their cigarette butts after use just on the street, and it makes the streets look untidy. It is not good for animals who might be eating the butts. So something needs to be done about it. And unfortunately, I think the reason why we need to start is with education, because a lot of smokers, we did a survey recently, 75% of smokers believe that cigarette filters are made of cotton or paper, and therefore think it's okay to throw it on the street.
Right.
Well, it's actually made of cellulose acetate. And 25% of smokers, they feel no problem with throwing butts on the street. So I think this is where we need to focus on first and foremost, which is what you need to do after smoking a cigarette, the proper disposal, take a pocket ashtray. And we also encourage communes or to have more ashtrays available, because it is true that as smoking indoors, especially in pubs and so, has disappeared globally, people are smoking more outdoors, and as a result, I think there's more cigarette butt littering. But it is a material topic because our stakeholders are annoyed. That's one thing, but there's also regulation coming in that area. I mean, in the EU, you have a single-use plastics directive, and among the 10 products covered by the directive is also cigarette filters. So there's regulatory action coming as well. And the good thing is we know that if people are informed and you motivate them, people can change behavior. We have done some first campaigns in this area in Austria, for example, where we saw significant reductions in cigarette butt littering already happening. The other good news is that the new products that we sell are heated tobacco products, because they don't burn. You don't need to step them out, and they don't smell. What actually happens is a lot of the users of IQOS heat sticks, they put the sticks back into the pack after use, which you don't do with cigarettes. And we know, for example, that as a result of this, there is 50% less littering of heat sticks compared to cigarette butts. So in a way, as we are transforming our business, a nice side benefit is littering will reduce automatically. But still, I think littering should be eradicated completely if we can. So it's an important topic for us, for sure.
No, it's good to hear about that, because waste management and littering is something I've probably covered less since lockdown started, purely because people are in public spaces and on the go less. So it's good to see some planning coming out for the future. Yeah.
And it was also actually one of the areas where, if you ask where, did COVID have an impact? This is one of the areas where COVID did have an impact, because a lot of the activities outside with campaigns, for example, are now not possible. So that's, we had to delay some of the things a little bit. And, broader than cigarette butt littering, if you think about waste, another important thing is we are more and more electronics manufacturer as well. I mean, the heat sticks are heated in an IQOS device, and we need to make sure that those devices are recyclable. So that's another part of our commitment, which is to make sure that every consumer can, dispose of them by having a recycling option, basically, for the devices, and we make them of recycled materials.
No, that's something I think we'll see a lot more of here. We've got MPs on the Environmental Audit Committee are running an inquiry into e-waste that did get paused during lockdown, but has now started again. And they did not go easy on companies like Amazon that are producing electronic devices. So it's something I think we'll hear a lot more about in the months to come.
No, and I think it will have business impacts more broadly, because, the right to repair will come as well. All good things for the environment, but it does mean that businesses need to adapt and see what consumers want and what policymakers want, and adapt accordingly.
Great. Well, I think that's the last question that I have time to touch on today, but thank you so much for joining us on the call.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
And everyone watching, thank you as well for taking the time. Just a friendly reminder that all of our past episodes of Susty Talk can be found on our website and on our YouTube channel. The series will be continuing even though lockdown is easing here in the UK, and we will have a new talk at least once every week. So in the meantime, stay safe, stay well, and keep up the conversation.